Welcome to our special Christmas edition of the Disruptive Social Care podcast with social care provocateur and social media queen Shirley Ayres and myself, Stuart Arnott, creator of Mindings, a service dedicated to bringing social media to the disconnected. In this weekly show, we aim to spread the word about what's going on in the world of disruptive social care, amplify the voices of people with great ideas that few people have heard about, help our communities connect and collaborate, and interview thought leaders across the sector. And we have a bit of a bumper show today. How are we doing?
Indeed.
Show number 16.
Yes.
Special Christmas show, and we have had over 4,500 views and listens of the podcast so far. So looking forward to a bumper show today.
Absolutely.
And even more listeners.
Yes. And exciting news about the launch of our new Disruptive Social Care podcast crowdfunding platform. It's interesting, using the million pixel model, and a lot of credit here due to Stu and Ian for organising it, means that everyone who supports us can become a friend of the podcast in 2013. And actually, having hundreds of people and organisations supporting us both guarantees our editorial freedom and continues to provide an independent voice promoting innovation for care. And of course, early supporters benefit from choosing the best spots on our mosaic.
Absolutely. The funny thing was, in building this, so the $1 million homepage was something that was out in 2006 and everybody was doing it. It was very famous. It was for people who don't know about it, it was a British student who created just a grid of pixels that people could buy a pixel, and he managed to raise £1 million. Subsequently got caught out with the tax man because he didn't get the tax affairs. He got hammered later on for it. But the idea was it was to fund his education. So we thought we'd do that, we'd resurrect that idea. But unfortunately, the code from 2006 isn't quite compliant with today's standards. And so we had to do a lot of work making sure that people could, with confidence, use this to help crowdfund. So yeah, you can buy pixels, you can put banners on there. We have a special roll of honour for people as well. So it's a really good opportunity for people to help promote us, to support us, and also to get your brand associated with the show.
Absolutely. All care innovators. We expect to see you.
Absolutely.
On our crowdfunding page.
See you there.
And, it's interesting. I had an amazing response to my post about how the internet and digital technology can combat isolation. Over 300 retweets and lots of debate. So it seems that connecting innovators with frontline staff remains a big challenge across the sector.
Certainly is.
And I hope my provocation paper for the Nominet Trust, Can Online Innovations Enhance Social Care, which will be published in early January, will be a timely addition to this debate. Community Care invited us all to share our hopes for social work and social care in 2013, so I thought I'd share mine. I would like the term care to be much more inclusive of all the community support services which keep people feeling safe, secure and supported in their communities. That we use the power of social technology for improving services, and this must include providing better and more accessible information which helps people make real choices about their care and support needs. Formal and informal care is provided every day for children, young people and adults by millions of people. We should be using technology to help people make connections and support the innovations which are building and supporting community wellbeing. So I'd actually like to see the development of a community wellbeing and social technology hub, which will update everyone, the public, practitioners, funders, innovators and people who use services, about the latest innovations that are available. How good would that be?
Brilliant. That's great, Shirley. I look forward to hearing about how that develops over the coming year.
A lot of interest, Stu.
Nobody had better stand in your way.
Something like that.
So Shirley, in our jam-packed show this week, what do we have on the agenda?
A lot. It's actually quite hard compressing all of the things that are happening into such a short show. But
it's not been that long since we've done the last show, but so much has happened.
Absolutely, yes. We have the launch of the Dementia Challenges website, the Community Catalysts Innovation Challenge, questions about when did it become okay to belittle older people, Beyond Winterbourne, how social media is challenging silo thinking and connecting people and ideas across sectors, new guidelines about using social media in social work, the development of an online resource which will help young people moving from education into work, changing patterns of learning and study across the generations, bridging the gap between research and practice, social media and social housing, and the NHS spread and adoption tool.
Wow, so sit down, well, make yourself a cup of tea, sit down. We've got a full agenda ahead. Let's crack on.
I was very pleased to see the launch of the Dementia Challenges website, a labour of love by Lee, who tweets as Dragon Misery, and many supporters. The site provides signposts to online resources which support people living with dementia and their carers, and includes information, links, examples and tips. Definitely worth a look.
Fantastic. Great endeavour.
Yes. And a mention for the Community Catalysts Innovation Challenge, which was run by at Helen Turner 14 with Leicestershire Council. Now, the aim of this project is to support organisations to innovate, enhance and transform the services they offer. So 8 projects were successful in gaining a bursary, and these represented a wide cross-section of the supported housing sector. And projects include The Art of Reminiscing, which involves older people living in sheltered housing sewing a large quilt containing photographs and memories of family life, work and industry in the northwest Leicestershire villages. And My Living Voice uses art to highlight the issues and barriers ex-offenders face with resettlement, and includes the development of peer support and mentoring by ex-offenders. Really interesting.
Great project.
And I was delighted to learn that the Healthy Living Club in Lambeth has now secured funding for 2 years.
Yeah, thrilled for them. I went down to visit them.
I know you did.
Since the last show.
Yes, that's on my list to go and visit them in the new year. As I've said before, every local authority would benefit and learn from their approach. And an interesting article highlighted in the Telegraph, and of course, subject of some much debate over the last weeks or so. When did it become okay to belittle older people? And I think it's definitely time to challenge all the negative media coverage about older people being a burden on the state. We've really got to start valuing the contribution that older people make. And the Department of Health recently published Transforming Care, a national response to Winterbourne View Hospital. And I recommend reading Beyond Winterbourne, challenging thoughts from at Ermintrude 2, and comments about what needs to be addressed in the failings of a complicated and confused health and social care system. There are also very thoughtful reflections from Atsapia Knows in the light of Winterbourne View Serious Case Review. It was a very comprehensive review, a lot of lessons.
It was, and I recommend, I was reading the Beyond Winterbourne piece by Ermintrude 2 the other night. It's good stuff. I totally recommend reading it.
I thought, we have such a wide audience, and I thought it would be interesting to select a snapshot of events and initiatives which show how social media is challenging silo thinking and connecting people and ideas. So to start with, a great post from At Whose Shoes, helping to remind thinkers and policymakers what it's all about. Thanks, Jill, for a lovely mention of the podcasts, and the gentle reminder about the importance of people who are developing social policy, about keeping in touch and actually engaging with the public.
That's great, yes. And I went to the Healthy Living Club in Lambeth with Jill, Whose Shoes. We had a really nice day down there. And Jill's still sending me tweets in Latin.
Well, good social learning there, Stu.
It really is.
Do you translate them via Google Translate?
I don't need to, because if I make any mistakes, she's quick enough to correct me.
And it was lovely to see Norm McNamara at Norm's talking about his Planting Memories Garden project on the newly launched Care Channel. And it is really good to see more organisations recognising the value of broadcasting.
Absolutely, and a big hello to Norms. Lovely chap.
Yes. And helpful guidelines about using social media in social work have been produced in a new video from the Scottish Social Services Council at SSSC. And well done to John Bolton, who wrote the script. Definitely a must-view for everyone involved in social work and social care.
Absolutely. John Bolton, lovely guy. I look forward to meeting him at some point because I've just discovered he works just along the road from where I was brought up.
Oh, yes. Well,
small world.
Yeah, well, lots of things planned for 2013.
Yeah, another good Scotsman, of course. You're very welcome.
That's okay. And what I was also interested to read was a new development which is helping young people prepare for life after education because it's so important. And Flip is an online tool which will help young people build a strengths profile based on feedback from trusted friends on Facebook and other social networks. And this will also be helpful because the profiles can be used when creating CVs and preparing for interviews, which are incredibly important skills for young people to have. So well done to the Nominate Trust for supporting this. And fewer old people are going to college, but more are learning online. Older people are more likely to study independently at home than in groups at university or college, a NIACE report has found. And according to this report, the most dramatic change since 2005 is the swing from older people, here defined as people over 50, learning about computing, to those who are actually using computers to learn online.
That's great. It's really exciting.
Yeah, fascinating report.
Yep.
And at the other end of the scale, I hate school, but I love learning. Young people challenging the world of formal education through the Innovative Educator. And that's a powerful post in which young people discuss creating an education system for the 21st century, which of course will also have a lot of elements of being online.
It definitely will. The number of I used to do a lot of filming in schools, and the number of kids who are sitting there with a laptop or a PC or a tablet in front of them, it's the way to learn.
Well, as young people say to me when I discuss about how they learn online, they want to find something out, they go to YouTube, find a video.
It's absolutely the way to do it. And unfortunately, our Mr. Gove seems to think the opposite about rote learning, that it's important to remember dates and things like that. When you have a device like this that has the collective learning of the whole of humanity at the touch of your fingers, learning facts isn't relevant. Learning to research for facts is what's important.
And also learning to analyse what the data is telling us and come to an informed decision.
Exactly.
Really, that is education.
Yes.
That should be how people learn, and at any age or stage.
Yeah.
So, sort of continuing a bit on the learning theme, one critical message from the academic impact conferences I've attended this year is that universities and their researchers need to share their work more effectively with policymakers and be much more prepared to engage in public debates about the value of their research. And I recommend the Storify of research and practice that was compiled by Helen Cara, which celebrates the launch of the British Library Social Welfare Portal, a one-stop shop for anyone who cares about social welfare. Good development.
Great.
And it seems that 2012 was the year in which the housing association sector went social. Paul Taylor, tweeting as Paul Bromford, gave an excellent presentation at the SOCMED 12 conference, and I loved his insights in his 10 myths from the year we went social. And I particularly liked number 10, the myth that social work is great for broadcasting news.
Oh, dear, yeah.
As you know, Stu, I do see a great difference between people who broadcast and those who have conversations and engage.
Yeah.
And I was reading about how social media can help you do your job in UK housing, and noted that the Bromford Group tops the list in social communications because it behaves as a network and connects staff, residents and partners. So, hat tip to the Bromford Group.
Absolutely. And you will not be surprised to know that I'm meeting them in the new year.
Excellent.
Presenting Mindings to them.
Oh.
So I really look forward to meeting Paul Taylor, who I thought was actually called Paul Bromford.
We know you're Paul Taylor.
I look forward to meeting you,
Shout
Paul.
out for your excellent posts that we have quoted throughout the podcasts.
Yeah.
And in health, I was impressed to learn about the spread and adoption tool, which helps organisations increase the scale and pace of the spread and adoption of innovation in the NHS. And this is a fascinating tool. You know, it's got all these questions and you sort of work out where you are. Very good. We haven't even started. Across a whole range of questions. And then it produces a document about, you know, the things that you need to do and where you should be putting your efforts. And in fact, it is a fascinating tool developed by the NHS Innovation Hub. My belief is that this tool could be used right across the public sector. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it gives you a snapshot of what you need to do to embed innovation in your organisation. So highly recommended.
Absolutely. NHS Innovation Hub are great. There's some really exciting
Yes.
work. I met some people from there down at a conference in Bath a couple of weeks ago, and there's some amazing work going on. It just shows you that it is possible. There's great innovation to happen in large silo-like organisations if you empower individuals. It's really exciting.
I mean, it's interesting because the NHS are making a huge investment in innovation. You know, there's sort of hubs and lots of investment in thinking about doing things differently. I think my one reflection is that there is the NHS making this huge investment. What I don't see is the engagement with social care, with housing, with education, with employment that I think needs to be made. And I think maybe that's the biggest challenge that a lot of organisations have who are doing all of this innovative work, is how they are connecting up with other people who need to be part of that jigsaw.
Yeah. I'm also very happy to see NHS Innovation Hub people reaching out to organisations and small companies and innovators instead of reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
And I have some news that we'll hopefully be able to discuss in the new year about that with our engagement with them.
Excellent. So, Stu, I know you've had a busy and very exciting few weeks. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about the Everybody Tech event you attended and to share with us what is going on in the world of Mindings.
Oh boy, when was it we last met up? Because it feels like it was months ago. So much has happened. It's been a whirlwind. Anyway, Everybody Tech was a terrific event that I attended a few weeks ago, and I went there actually because one of our alumnus. Oh God, Jill's going to tweet me again. One of our previous guests, Anthony Rebo, who was on Talking About Freedom. He was doing a presentation at this event, and the event was primarily for people who have visual impairments. But the idea behind the event was innovative technology for everyone.
Yeah.
And perhaps the best example of that, and you could literally hear everyone in the audience go, wow, I hadn't thought of that, was they brought somebody along from Google to demonstrate Google Goggles, which is like a pair of glasses that has some cameras and it identifies things in your viewing scene in front of you, etc. And it enhances visually what you're seeing. And the person from Google was blind, and he was saying this is a great tool for blind people. And you could literally just look around and see people going, what? A tool for blind people? And he said, yeah, put a pair of headphones in, put some voice synthesis on it, and you have a tool which describes everything that's going around you using that. And people were just going, wow, I hadn't thought of that. So yeah, some great innovations like that. There was Panasonic were there, were demonstrating the new television, which has all manner of audio descriptions for going through the menus, etc. Very clever. And this is a technology that they're not making a special edition of the television that costs an extra £50 because it's got this disabled feature on it. It's just a feature they're putting out for everybody. Part of the reason that they're doing it is simply the economies of scale for them to put on this license, this piece of software. If they put it on every single television they make, the licensing cost is tiny instead of on a limited number of them. So that was great. And it was also, people were saying that day, well, I can think of other uses for that. That's just, that'll be a useful thing for children. It's a useful thing if, if you're just a little bit short-sighted, it's everybody technology.
Because they've actually set up an innovation group, haven't they, to carry on the conversation after the event.
It was built in association with RNIB. They did a lot of work with it. They engaged RNIB very early on and asked them to help them develop it and help them market it. So it wasn't done in isolation, which was great. They did a demonstration of the Google self-driving car. Again, I hadn't thought of this, but very useful for a person who's visually impaired. It's not just a cool piece of it actually has a real-world application.
Did they bring the car into the hotel?
They showed us a video of this car driving about, I think it was in Berlin. It was quite creepy, but it was very, very clever technology. So it was a really, really good event. So we'll put a link to that onto the website. So if you go to disruptivesocialcare.com, we'll put links to some of the variety of technologies that were in discussion that day. But it was a really good event. It was a really interesting mix of people. And for what was primarily a visually impaired event, the number of people who had iPads was astonishing. But running some really amazing applications. So there really was a lot of people saying, if you're a developer, there's a huge market of people out there who are looking for cool products. Really exciting area for people to get involved in.
It was a good hashtag. Everybody tech. So,
yeah, it was a great event. Now, regarding Mindings, oh my goodness, lots been going on. The key thing, though, was there was a competition that was running a few weeks back, run by an organisation called Improvement East, who are a partnership of all the authorities in the east of England. And also some in the Midlands. And what they effectively do is they're run by local authorities for local authorities, and by aggregating they can get together the purchasing power and efficiencies, etc., and they're delivering services for these local authorities. And they ran a competition called Innovation in Adult and Social Care, and they were looking for innovative new solutions to meet the challenges of social care. So I went up to Cambridge and presented Mindings. We got through to the last 5, and we were presenting Mindings there. And we're standing on a stage with a banner either side of the stage saying, how do we deliver more services, better services, for less money? Big challenge ahead.
Absolutely.
But at least the poster wasn't saying, how can we save money? Yep. They were actually saying, how can we do better with less money? So it's quite a challenge. And we won.
I know, I was thrilled with that tweet. And a lot of people were on Twitter, I have to say. Yeah, real excitement.
And it's a significant thing.
And congratulations, Stu.
Thank you very much. And it's not just another bauble, it's something really significant. There's a pot of £100,000 been put together by these local authorities in order to fund and invest in the company and fund a trial that's going to be running across 6 local authorities who currently all want to do the trial.
There's a logistical challenge.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. So, and they want to do it as soon as possible. They're really keen to roll it out as soon as possible. So we're really, really excited about it. It's a fantastic opportunity for us. It's given us some much needed funding. Yes. Ian and I had just split the last packet of super noodles between us. So that came at just the right time. But obviously the fact that it's going to lead to validation, it's going to lead to this being a service that they'll recommend to people. So that's hugely excited. It's hugely exciting. And of course, as a result of that, I've been approached by quite a few people, companies, individuals, funders, etc., saying, hello there, Stuart. We're just wondering how you're getting on. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But you know what is also going to be important is the evaluation you do of the trial. Because I think, there are a lot of exciting apps and technologies around. And we have to move to the next stage of saying, what difference do they make? And what's their social impact? And then making sure that everybody is aware that these are available. So I'm going to be following this with great interest, but I'm really thrilled. As I've said many times to you, if I had a choice, what I would want in my home is Mindings.
Well, it was great. They did give a special mention at the end. Some of the other people they were up against were offering up some pretty kind of hardcore telecare, traditional telecare type solutions. And I want to give a very special mention. The organisation, the Campaign to End Loneliness.
Oh, yes.
We spoke about them at the time when the study came out. But effectively, their study became the core of my presentation. The fact 10 million people in the UK over the age of 65, a third of them live alone. 1 in 5 have less than weekly contact with a family member or friend. But it was their information that that loneliness is as detrimental to your health as smoking and obesity. And if you're lonely, you're 5 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's. Every time I say that line, jaws drop. And so I was saying at my presentation that one of the biggest challenges facing seniors in the coming years, because that 10 million people over 65 is by 2050 will become 19 million.
Yep.
The biggest challenge they're facing isn't dementia, isn't cancer, isn't osteoporosis, all the things that pharmaceutical companies would like you to think are the challenges because they have medication for that. It's social isolation and loneliness, not something that medication can fix, as Mark Brown would happily tell you. And so we said that we, with Mindings, with this technology, by connecting families, by connecting friends, by creating virtual communities of people,
Yep.
which is something that we're
It's
looking
close
into.
to my heart.
Absolutely. We're delighted to welcome the Right Honourable Paul Burstow as our special Christmas guest on the Disruptive Social Care podcast. Paul is the Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament for Sutton, Cheam and Worcester Park. He's enjoyed an active parliamentary career and his posts have included spokesman for older people, 1997 to 2003, and Shadow Secretary of State for Health, 2003 to 2005. Paul was appointed as Minister of State for Health Care Services in May 2010 and lost his position in the Cabinet reshuffle of September 2012. Paul was appointed as Chair of the Committee on the Draft Care and Support Bill in November 2012, which will be reporting to Parliament in March 2013. Coming close to delivering that. Is all going well?
It is indeed, yeah. Yes.
Excellent. The Joint Committee on the Draft Care and Support Bill, which your chair is conducting, pre-legislative scrutiny into the draft bill and the policies it seeks to implement. This is a significant bill to overhaul social care, which places adult safeguarding on a statutory footing, introducing a nationwide threshold for council-funded adult care support and new rights to support for carers, as well as codifying the multiple existing laws on social care. I would encourage everyone to respond to the questions being asked because they will significantly affect literally millions of people.
Thank you for the introduction. And of course, Paul, your role as chair of the scrutiny committee is quite significant.
Well, I mean, it's a privilege to have that role of chairing the committee. I have a very experienced, talented and expert group of peers and MPs that are on the committee, people with their own history and experience in social care and health, people like Norman Warner, who was a former Labour Health Minister, Sally Greengross, a well-respected figure in the sector, and many others who will contribute their expertise to framing the response that we want to make to the bill.
Challenging.
Yes.
But very interesting and significant. And you will, of course, be aware that we invited people to submit questions for this interview through social media channels. And there has been a lot of interest in this interview. And I should mention that Paul is active on Twitter as Paul Burstow. And I noted your tweeted wish list for social care in 2013 reflects many of the concerns expressed in the questions we're exploring today. That Deal Not is included in the Care and Support Bill, that the Care and Support Bill becomes an act, a government review of the funding of social care, the NHS getting family carers, a criminal offence of corporate neglect, and more community social work. So, coming back to your time as the Care Minister, what is the one decision you regret not having made as the Minister, and what would you do differently today?
Gosh, I mean, I suspect if anyone sort of reflects on their time in government, there will be many things that if they had their time over again, they would want to do differently. I think probably the thing that sticks in my throat the most, the thing that I feel that we haven't made as much progress on as I would have liked to have done in 2.5 years, is really around the support for family carers. That's what I meant by the NHS getting family carers, because I don't think that as an institution the NHS does get family carers. I think there are some brilliant people within the NHS who really do understand that a key to a successful recovery, a key to supporting a person with a long-term health condition in their own home, in their own community, is the support that's provided to the family to enable them to come along on that journey, but to recognise it's a different journey. And the thing that's frustrated me when I was in opposition was that Labour promised breaks for carers. They put money in. The Coalition promised breaks for carers, and we put the money in. And each year we try to make it tighter, the rules that would be used to get the NHS to do this. And we just had a survey published by the Carers Trust just last week,
Indeed.
which shows out of 50 trusts that they surveyed, 14 had done nothing.
Yeah.
And I just find that shocking. I just find that a shocking indictment of some parts of the NHS.
Yes. Integrated thinking. What do you think should be done in circumstances like that?
Well, I think the lesson I draw from it is that just trying to set ever tighter sort of targets doesn't actually work, because the NHS is very good at gaming and working its way around targets. And certainly when it came to the carers ones, that's exactly what the NHS has done. So in the end, it does have to be about inspiring leaders, actually working in the organisation to change the way it perceives carers. So it's about leadership at a local level. And one of the great privileges of being a minister is you do go out and meet those sorts of people and you see what difference they make on the ground. So, I saw an excellent example over in Huntingdonshire just a few months ago, where they had introduced social prescribing for carers' breaks. It was truly amazing just how carers responded to that. Their sort of feeling was that, for the first time, they'd picked up the phone or gone and seen someone and something had happened.
Yeah.
So I think that, that in a way is a very good illustration of how things can be joined up in a very positive way, and how actually you can give GPs a sense that they actually have control as well, because they had a way of helping the carer.
Yes, I mean that concept of social prescribing is fascinating, and maybe also the other part of the equation is making sure that carers actually have a much stronger voice.
Yes, and I think that comes back to issues around the draft bill and how we make sure that the, if you like, legal underpinning of the rights of service users and carers is as clear as it possibly can be, so that they are very much able to say that the idea of no decision about me without me is embodied in the way in which social care is delivered. We've asked some questions in the call for evidence that we published last week about this, and I'm looking forward to seeing the sort of submissions we get as to how we can strengthen that user and carer voice in our social care system.
Incredibly important. There is a feeling that the Department of Health does not understand the significant differences between social care and healthcare, that social care is a poor relation to health, and it is just seen as an adjunct rather than being central to supporting people to live more independent and fulfilling lives in their communities. Do you think the NHS mandate should be extended to social care, i.e. the health and care mandate? Otherwise, how will people with social care needs realistically benefit from coordinated, integrated and person-centred services with stable funding?
Yeah, I mean, I think the NHS mandate can play a role in sending that signal that the Department of Health does get the different and unique contribution that social care can play when it comes to the support that people need. I think, though, that it goes deeper than that. I think historically the Department of Health, and indeed historically government, has seen social care as a less important issue for them. That's reflected in successive governments' funding settlements for social care, and that criticism can be made probably just as much of this government. Although more money was put in, it was nowhere near the same amounts of resource committed to the NHS. And yet we know that investment in social care in so many cases can actually substitute for NHS care and actually deliver better results that are more tailored to the individual and their circumstances. So one of the things I take some hope from is in the white paper that I published earlier this year. One of the things we talked about in there was coordinated care as being the way in which we can reimagine integration, because integration is a very alien sort of bit of jargon that we throw out, and everyone can say, yes, I'm in favour of integration, but my sort of integration, not your sort of integration. So talk to different professional groups. They all have their own view about it. And I was really pleased that just over the weekend, National Voices published a piece of work that they've been doing for the department, for the NHS Commissioning Board, which does seem to be a rallying point around which everyone can gather as a way of taking this agenda forward. And curiously enough, it's about saying that coordinated care is about the person and their carer, and that everything should gravitate around them. At the moment, the gravity well in the NHS is the NHS, not people, and people get sucked into that black hole and don't necessarily always come out.
I mean, it's a question I've asked many people. Do we have a problem with the language? Because, of course, the NHS talk about patients and social care talks about people who use services. And it may seem a sort of minor point, but I can imagine sitting round the table with different parties who need to be involved in coordinated care, and the language maybe is stopping coordinated care happening.
I'm sure that we are divided by a common language in some ways when it comes to these things, and in some cases not even a common language. There is something about the education aspect, training aspect of our social care workforce, our healthcare workforce, but also it's a mindset change. The big challenge for our health and care system over the next 50, 60 years is not how we reduce mortality, it's how we manage comorbidities, how we manage long-term health conditions. And that requires, I think, a different mindset on the part of the NHS. And describing someone who is living lifelong with a health problem, maybe with an enduring mental health problem, maybe both, is to call them a patient is to see the centre of power in the wrong place. It has to be about recognising that actually the power to recover, to have as good a life as possible, is more in the hands of the patient and their family and their carers than often it is in the professionals. The professionals are there to help and facilitate. Often they are not able to actually deliver beyond that.
So do you think we should stop using patient and start using people?
Well, I would love that to be the case, and certainly I often when I was making speeches as a minister, and I still have this problem now, is that sort of interchangeability, and you wind up using maybe a sentence to describe one simple thing, which is we're talking about people. And yes, I think it would be quite good if perhaps the next mandate that the Department of Health produces for the NHS Commissioning Board talked about people, and it would be very good that perhaps the NHS Commissioning Board, who have just published their guidance to clinical commissioning groups, if they started talking about people as well, that would be really good.
It has been suggested, and you've mentioned this briefly, that the funding of social care is likely to be a significant issue at the next general election, because understanding how social care is currently provided is complex. Because unlike the NHS, social care is not free at the point of need, and there are very complicated funding streams, which the public do not understand. So the Do Not recommendations are important, but is there a wider issue about how social care is funded? And do you have any suggestions for the government about how the very important political consensus around funding can be achieved?
Yes, I mean, I think I try and separate these two things out. Do Not is about how we finance our care, and it's about how we fairly share the burden between the individual and the state. And I think Do Not is the best effort to date to try and crack that rubric's cube, if you like, of how we do this in the right way. And the curious thing about it is that in the whole time that I was in government, and there was a back and forth between the Department of Health and the Treasury about whether we could or would or should or must do this, the Treasury never came up with an alternative. They did not have a plan B. Now, we know they don't have a plan B for the economy, so they clearly don't have a plan B for how we finance care either. And I think the absence of that plan B means that we have to go for plan A, which is implementing Do Not, and that does mean that there have to be clauses in the bill. But all too often the financing issue gets conflated with the funding one. And the funding one is an even bigger issue than the fairness issue that comes with financing care. And I'm under no illusion that the only way we'll get, in my view, a political consensus about this is if this government has the courage to actually start looking root and branch at what we're spending now on social care. Are we spending it well? And what's the sort of level of funding necessary to produce a sustainable system? And I draw the parallel with a piece of work that the Treasury commissioned when Gordon Brown was the Chancellor, which was a piece of work that was done by Derek Wanless for the Treasury, not independently. And that report ended with a plea that the Treasury should do the same piece of work. That was then for the NHS. It gave the government the justification for increasing national insurance to fund increased spending on the NHS over the last decade. I think that report then went on to say that the same needed to be done for social care. I think that's now long overdue. We need a Wanless type review of funding of social care. I don't pretend that will make it easy because we're in a pretty deep hole at the moment, but I think it will give a clear sense of how you get out of the current conundrum. Because at the moment, we're funding the wrong part of the system. We're spending a fortune on a sickness service when what we need to do is invest our money in a wellness service. And social care has more capability and potential to become the heart of a wellness service than the NHS really ever does.
Indeed. And I think one of the problems, of course, is that with all the budget cuts to local authorities, there's a real issue about there are no... there's a lot of cost shunting, and local authorities do not get rewarded for promoting independence and re-ablement. And I think there's a lot of people who are slightly puzzled that I'm accepting, Deal Not is one part of the funding equation, but Deal Not was estimated to cost $2 billion. And yet it is recorded that $3 billion was given back from the Department of Health to the Treasury. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think it's a very good point, which a number of people have made, and fundamentally this is about political will and priorities. And up until now, there's been a lack of political will by successive governments to start to address this issue. And as a result of that, social care has been the poor relation. I think part of that is that social care is sort of hidden behind the NHS. The two were born in the 1940s, and one's always been sort of very much hidden by its big brother, the NHS. And people think everything is like the NHS, that it's free at the point of need.
Yes.
And as you rightly said in your question, it isn't. And we need to get people to wake up to that. Because my fear is, although there is a lot of concern amongst the sector, amongst the charities and so on about funding, that has not permeated out into a wider discussion in our community. It's still only those that are directly touched by a service that is running away from them because it's not able to fund the level of care that it was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago.
But it is fascinating, why social care has not got a higher priority when we think that there are, 6 million informal carers, 2 million people working in the sector, and millions more receiving services. I mean, it does seem to be a huge challenge because it affects millions of people, and yet if we're talking about political will, then it hasn't had a high priority.
I mean, there's a potentially huge political force out there that once it finally does mobilise, government will sit up and take notice. But the sector is fragmented. Provider community is very fragmented. There isn't a single voice there. The Care and Support Alliance that has brought together a large number of the charities has begun to change that. And I think that's meant over the last couple of years, they've been able to engage with the government on the white paper that's been produced and the bill. And I think they would say that they've seen the benefits of that. But politicians will really only, I think, sit up and see this as something that all of us need to take an interest in, not just a minority of MPs and peers who currently take an interest in it. When they have delegations of carers coming to their surgeries to talk about their concerns. And I know what carers will say when they hear me say that. They don't have the time because they're too busy caring and because the NHS isn't providing them with any opportunity of a break. So that's the trap that all too often carers find themselves in. But that mobilisation, I think, is absolutely critical. That creation of a social movement is absolutely vital.
So, hot tip from Paul Burstow: how to create a social movement. Pretty important, I think, for 2013. And an interesting one that people often discuss: how can we reconcile the fundamental tension between integration and competition, especially when the terms and conditions for many frontline care staff are so poor?
Yeah, I mean, I'll sort of try and take that in two bits, if I may, because I think there's an issue about terms and conditions, and you see that in home care particularly, where care workers are turned into clock watchers, where they're not even paid for the journey time between one visit and another, and that drives them in some cases below the minimum wage, which is just totally unacceptable. But I think this sort of juxtaposing of competition and integration, and in some cases, not in your question, but others will pose that in a very pejorative way, that competition bad, integration good. Whereas in fact, what we now have for the first time in this country is a legal framework that says if integration of services, if joining things up around people delivers a better result for them and their families, then that trumps competition. And the competition law cannot supersede and force them to break that service up into little bits to be fought over by different organisations who are prepared to pay different prices. And I think that's very important that we've now got that clarity in the law, and that Monitor, who are the body that regulate in the NHS, now have as a key part of what their job is to support coordinated care and joined up services. And where the competition comes in is over things like we've heard today, the greater publication of information, so people can compare which surgeon does the best surgery, not just because that tells us something as users of these services where to go, but also because it tells the surgeon something about how they can improve their practice. And I think it's that is the important sort of competition we want, competition that drives improvement, not competition that drives us to the bottom because it's simply on base of price.
I'm a great advocate of choice and control, but sadly many people feel that the government spending cuts forced on local authorities have derailed positive progress. Because this was seen as a way of cutting expenditure, with councils cynically imposing choice on those unable to choose. What are your thoughts about the current system, where those who are able to choose or who have strong advocates get a vastly superior service to those who lack capacity to choose and have no advocacy support?
Wow, there's a lot in there, and a lot of very important points. I think first on advocacy. One of the things that the Draft Care and Support Bill talks about as a service that local authorities should be looking to offer is advocacy. But it puts it as advocacy once you've become eligible and you've been assessed as being eligible for a service. For me, that feels as though it's in the wrong place, that actually there's advocacy before you even get into the system.
Yes.
Advocacy that supports you to not necessarily even access formal services, but actually to navigate other support. And then there's advocacy to make sure that when you come into the system that you're getting the right support. And therefore, I think one of the things we're going to look at on the committee will be whether the bill currently captures that properly, whether the rights that are in the bill are sufficient to ensure that sort of advocacy. I think there's no doubt that some local authorities are using the sort of cloak of personalisation as a way of hiding the fact that they are significantly tightening access to services, that they are reducing the sort of what's available. And actually in there lies one of the big sort of flaws in the way I think quite a few local authorities interpret personalisation. It's personalisation, but personalisation as the local authority sees it, whereas personalisation should be seen from the perspective of the person themselves. And again, I think that the bill, with the principles it sets out right at the beginning, which sets out a set of, if you like, values that ought to underpin the way in which decisions are made, provides, I think, a much better starting place for the conversations about these services. But one final thing I would say is there's a very good report published recently by the New Economics Foundation. It was done, I think, jointly with Scope, a charity, looking at different local authorities' responses to the budget pressures. And what it revealed is that the authorities that are coping best with the stress of the financial pressures are the ones that actually start from the point of view of the service user and carer, and actually involve them in the design of the services, not just involve them in the process of assessing their needs and then working up their individual care plan. So they see them as partners in the whole process, and that's delivering better results. And I'd like to see that sort of approach more widely adopted.
Because the care sector have been pioneers in involving people who use care services in developing and commenting on services. But there is a feeling that the government only connects, for example, with the two main carer charities and does not discuss carer issues directly with carers or smaller carer groups. How can we encourage wider engagement? I mean, not just with a broader range of carers, but a broader range of people who use services.
I mean, I think that's a fair point. It goes back to my point actually often about how difficult it is to step away from the caring role and what needs to be done to help people in that regard. I think to be fair to the department, with the consultation around the draft bill, they use social media in a number of ways. They tweeted out all of the clauses to the bill. They had an online facility for people to comment clause by clause on the bill. So there was, if you like, that opportunity for people to come to it and comment as individuals. I personally, as Minister, went to the Carers Summit that Carers UK organised every year, not because it was Carers UK, but because of all the carers that came there, and hundreds came, and it was a great experience. I'm going to put it that way, a terrifying experience in some cases. But you didn't leave that not knowing how carers felt about some of the issues that they were confronting every day. And I went again this year as a backbench MP because I wanted to just sit in and listen, and I think it's very important we do that. So one of the things I would say sort of through your podcast is we're looking as part of the work of the committee over the next couple of months to have some outreach events. I hope we can tailor one of those for carers so that we can have, if you like, the authentic voice of carers directly representing themselves, as well as the important work that the Carers Trust and Carers UK do.
And of course, we do consider the podcast as an invaluable communications platform for everyone. Stu.
I missed that bit. I should have said that, shouldn't I? Oh dear.
Some people tell us. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about Winterbourne View because it was a scandal that promoted a wide-ranging review of the failings of a very complicated and confused health and social care system, which led to the publication of Transforming Care, a national response to Winterbourne View Hospital. Now, the government set out a programme of action to transform services so that vulnerable people no longer live inappropriately in hospitals and are cared for in line with best practices. Now, you've advocated that corporate bodies, their boards, their directors and financiers should be held to account for the provision of poor care and harm, but there's no requirement for CEOs of boards to have any experience in care. Now, you've suggested there should be a criminal offence of corporate neglect. So what are your thoughts about the report and how it will be implemented?
Well, the report which Norman Lamb presented to Parliament last week, I mean, I think it's a very good report. I think he's really gripped the issue and I think forced all the different organisations involved to go further than I think they wanted to. I think there was a deal of reluctance on the part of the NHS to be tied down quite so firmly to a programme of winding down these so-called assessment and treatment centres. And I'm really pleased that Norman has pushed that as far as he has. And I think my only comment really is that he, I think himself acknowledges that he's now going to have to hold their feet to the fire week after week to make sure that they actually do deliver it, that this doesn't sort of just disappear back off the radar, which is often the case, that because people with learning disabilities tend to be a minority of a minority, so they just don't get counted virtually. I think in terms of corporate neglect, the more I looked at this over the last year and the more I thought about it, the bit that really outraged me was that whilst everyone else seemed to be getting the blame, the commissioners, CQC, who were in the dock really from day one, and finally, quite rightly, the 10 or so staff that were the direct hands-on perpetrators of this vile set of crimes, did get sentenced, and some have gone to jail, quite rightly, for it. That it did beg a question for me about, well, what were the directors of the company doing? This was not a one-off event. This was a series of events. This was a cultural cruelty, was what Judge Ford, in handing down the sentences, said. Where was the corporate accountability? And I think, looking around the world, there are other jurisdictions that have these offences of corporate neglect. And we now need to learn from them and import something of that sort. And you're right, I think this issue about the expertise and knowledge of directors is very relevant. And I think CQC already have the statutory powers to look at whether people are fit and proper persons to run care organisations. I just don't think they've used that in a creative way to drive the sort of cultural change we need at the board level in some of our care providers.
Significant challenges ahead for the CQC. And coming on to this whole issue of staffing, ministers praise the hard work and dedication of the more than 1.5 million staff and acknowledge the importance of having a skilled and properly rewarded workforce. Now, registration for all types of social care staff is being introduced into other parts of the UK, and the rewards are beginning to emerge as people take on more responsibility for their own competence. In England, there appears to be no prospect of registration, despite legislation being passed in 2000. And I suspect that the general public will be shocked to learn that staff are not required to be registered and regulated. Why did you not follow through with the compulsory registration of care workers?
Yeah, it's a very fair question. And I think the answer to that question is that what I think absolutely is key, and I think what your listeners and those viewing this podcast today will be even more shocked to know, is that there aren't any national minimum standards for training of care staff. There is no code of conduct for care staff. And no work on such things had been commenced in the last 10 years. So back in 2000, when the care standards legislation was passed that set up the National Care Standards Commission, do you remember that organisation? It was around for about 12 months and then it was abolished. And then we had another one and another one. It's one of the reasons actually I take the view that although the CQC still has a lot to do to improve itself and deliver the hopes and expectations that were placed on it, just ripping it out by the roots and starting again is the most really seriously wrong way of approaching trying to improve things. But CQC actually have a role in this. One of the things that I wrote into the white paper, which I don't think has been noticed, so it's a good opportunity to draw some attention to it, is that what we want to see the CQC doing is using those new national minimum standards for training as a set of criteria against which they inspect care providers. And I'd like to see the CQC now apply the approach that's just been announced for the NHS, where NHS providers will have to publish their skill mix, their nursing numbers for their hospitals, applied to other care settings, so that there is a detailed account of what the skill mix is compared to the level of need in that institution. And I think that's a very more effective way, if you like, of getting providers to recognise that they have to recruit the right people in the first place in terms of the skills they have, and also to make sure that they're supporting the training of those staff. I think the trouble with a register in England is that, and having pressed the last government innumerable occasions and found that it wasn't being delivered, there's a huge cost involved in setting up the register without an immediate payback. Whereas by getting CQC to directly engage with providers and saying this is going to be an inspection rule, that you've got to have people trained to these minimum standards, I think we'll get the same result, but we'll get it quicker.
Can I just take issue with you
of course.
about the codes of practice? Because, of course, the General Social Care Council published Code of Practice for employers and for social care workers. Obviously no statutory underpinning for it, which I think was an issue, but widely accepted as good practice, and seems to have got lost as the work of the GSEC has transferred to the new Health and Care Professionals Council.
Yeah, and again, with the work that's being done by Skills for Care and Skills for Health, which is coming out, I think, in sort of March, April time of next year, that will give the Healthcare Professions Council, I think, some vital tools to do their work, and it will also give employers some vital tools, and it'll be, I think, absolutely critical that the Care Quality Commission use those in their evaluation of care providers. For me, it's part of a broader sort of agenda around how we make sure that providers are more transparent, so that people can actually see for themselves who are the ones that are employing the right skill mix in the first place.
Absolutely, yes. Stu?
Now, I'm a geek. Shirley's a geek too. And that
Not
means...
as much as a geek, Stu, if I may
Is this
say.
some sort of confessional we're in now?
Would you like to join the
Well,
geek
quite.
gang?
I should have stood up when I said that. But what that means is that I'm impatient, because I immediately see the benefit of something and think that everybody should be using it. And that access to the internet and social technology innovations are changing the way that people in communities are connecting and engaging, and are accessing information and support. Why do you think that the care sector has been so slow to take advantage of the power and the potential of technology and social networks to develop new models of support for older people?
I think this is partly because of the sort of the extent to which we do have very monolithic organisations, where the top of the organisation is so far away that someone at the front line can barely see them, and I think that has an impact in terms of the ability of an organisation to innovate, be entrepreneurial in the way in which it behaves, and to take risks. And in some of these cases, it's not even really about taking risks, because we're talking about often tried and trusted technologies being used in other service organisations. I watched the podcast with Richard Humphreys recently, and I think he summed up quite well the sort of things that need to be the guiding lights, if you like, for the adoption of technology. But I'll give an example. For example, in terms of telehealth and telecare. One of the ways in which telehealth and telecare can be rolled out very quickly is by the NHS recognising that there's already a market out there. It's called the smartphone market. You can go into any high street and pop into multiple shops that offer all sorts of contracts to fit most pockets, and all sorts of apps that are now available that can help with health monitoring and so on. It seems to me that the NHS needs to be working with that market, and through its GP practices and so on, it can be prescribing the app, which can then be downloaded onto the smartphone, and just a very simple way, it seems to me, in which you can start to get much, much broader adoption of those sorts of technologies for managing a lot of long-term health conditions.
Can I add a little addition onto that question as well? Maybe going to touch on it on another question, but ownership of patient records.
Well, from my point of view, and I think increasingly the view that the government has taken, the record belongs to the individual. Yeah. It's not the property of some other party. It's certainly not the property of the NHS. It's not the property of the local authority. And in an ideal world, it would be up there in the cloud, to use the technology jargon, and you would be able to authorise its use to varying degrees of detail by different organisations. And I think that has to be where we're striving to get. But it's not the organisations; it belongs to you. And I think again, there's a whole set of mindsets around ownership. I hear organisations sometimes talk about the NHS's money. It's not the NHS's money. It's not the local authority's money. It's the local taxpayers' money. It's the money should be thought about in terms of the person and how it's going to make a difference for them.
Great.
There have been an enormous amount of reports published in social care about the need for innovation, market development, and more integrated care. Do you think we need a moratorium on publications so that we can move from thinking to actually doing?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and the same could be said about social care as well. I mean, sort of reports from one decade to the next. When it comes to children's services and childcare, tragically, those reports, which get written every time there's a tragic case, then all too often wind up saying, we found in our work previous reports that have made many of the same recommendations and they've not been taken up. So I think you're right. That sort of bias to action, that determination to deliver is an absolutely essential part of good practice. So I can't but agree with you. And I think from my point of view, we've seen so many reports in social care. I was looking at some stuff around the draft bill. There was a report called the Barclay Report on social work in the early 1980s, which, if you read it, it could be the agenda that's being talked about today. If you read the Seaborn Report, there are elements of that which are very much part. And so these things feel a bit cyclical. And the same could be said about integration as well. I'm really pleased on the integration front that there does seem to be an attempt to break out of the cycle and get on to the next page, as it were, and actually start doing some of this stuff. And if that happens, then that will be good for everyone.
And sort of coming back to social work, of course, I am aware that you were involved in the launch of the business case for social work with adults. What are your thoughts about the role for adult social work beyond safeguarding in the future?
I think the role has to be much bigger than safeguarding. Safeguarding's very important, of course, but one of the areas I think there's a big potential role again, and I say again because the Barclay Report talked about it, is community social work.
Absolutely.
And community social work for me is about social workers being alongside, not substituting for the informal relationships and networks of support that exist in communities. In some cases, it may be about them helping to nurture and support and grow those networks because they're weak, but it's fundamentally about actually enabling those things to work. In fact, a conversation I had whilst I was in the department with David Beahan, who'd obviously was a practicing social worker himself many years ago. He didn't tell me how many years ago, I have to say. Was that in those days, pre the sort of technology and all of that, as a sort of a probationary social worker, there was a filing cabinet which was about all the local organisations in his patch. And he wasn't allowed to go out and practice until he'd familiarised himself with that. So he knew what was out there, what the community's assets were. And I think that's sort of asset-based, and I hate the jargon, but I feel like it's about, do you look at the world from the sort of view of the glass being half empty or half full? And I'm a half full man rather than a half empty man. And I think that sort of view of looking at the world in that way, that the world is a place where there are assets that can be tapped and should be improved and strengthened, is a key part of what good social work practice in the future needs to be about.
Well, we're coming to the end of the show now. We have a tradition in which we invite people to share their Fall Friday recommendations, because the show goes out on a Friday. Now, you're a tweeter at Paul Burstow, and you admirably managed to interact with a lot of people. I don't know how you find the time to do it, but you somehow do. Do you have any recommendations for us of people that you would like to recommend that people can follow?
I was told in some sort of rating recently, I was either the most boring or second most boring political tweeter. So I don't know whether I still score so well. But I suppose, top or bottom, at least you're noticed.
At least you're engaging.
Well, I think probably the criticism I would make of myself is that when I started, I was just shouting out, just broadcasting, and perhaps now I try and engage a bit more. I had a lovely exchange with Ermentrude at one stage, the NCAS conference. We were tweeting at each other. I think I would give a couple. I think the mental health cop, who recently won a Mind Award for his fantastic blog, deserves to be mentioned, certainly followed. And I think probably I would give a sort of a star to Ming Ho Reiter. who again writes on a range of things, but draws heavily on her own personal experience with her own family and brings a very sort of powerful narrative to it all, and worth following as well.
Okay, so, well, Paul, thank you so much for coming along to our conspiratorial den and spending the morning with us on our Christmas show. And we have a little Christmas present for you.
With many thanks, Paul, for being with us. And I would like to present you with an advanced copy of the Click Guide to Social Technology for Care, which is a directory of digital technologies which we believe will transform social care. We're trying to fill the information gap. So, with our compliments, and it will be available for people to buy and download in January. So, there you are. Christmas reading.
Fantastic. Can I have a signed copy?
Of course, of course. And,
it's going to go to your head.
and I have asked at Who's Shoes, Jill Phillips, if she will send you one of her very special Christmas sparkly trees, which will sit and sparkle on your laptop all over Christmas.
Fantastic. I shall have the laptop now on all of Christmas, so I can enjoy that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. This section of the programme is called Follow Friday because it's Friday and when we release the show, and also because people who use Twitter use #FF for Follow Friday. So we're just going to jump straight in there, Shirley. Who do you have for us this week that we should be looking out for?
Well, before I go on to that, I'd just like to mention a really good article that Twitter is to be the hero social media channel for media brands in 2013. And with 500 million Twitter accounts, over 1 billion Facebook accounts, and an estimated 200 million more online users across the world by 2013, social media is changing the way that brands connect and engage with their audience. The predictions are that Twitter is only going to get bigger. And I'd like to give a Follow Friday to all of our guests and everyone who has been supporting the podcast since their launch. And to mention very effective use of Twitter by the Tweetwell campaign, a week-long series of tweets from across the NHS in England about the work of accident, emergency and urgent care centres. NHS Xmas is back. Follow the hashtag to find out how you can access healthcare services over the Christmas holidays. Solihull Police provided one of my favourite tweets of the year. Great example of using humour alongside information and advice for the public. Sing like no one is listening, dance like no one is watching, tweet only what you're happy to have read out in court. And a special mention for Tommy on Tour, a tireless campaigner raising awareness about dementia and supporting improved services for carers.
My two, I've mentioned them already through the show, but I just want to give them a special mention. The campaign to end loneliness. Great work. And just while you're enjoying your Christmas dinner, just think if there's a neighbour, a friend, somebody local who might appreciate a little bit of company over Christmas as well. I'll certainly be doing that, buying in some extra mince pies to do that. And my friends at Improvement East. So if you want to keep up to date with how that trial of Mindings is going, follow Improvement East.
Excellent. And I'd just like to mention two campaigns starting next year. The Purple Angel logo is a simple idea created by @Norms with a number of action alliances, and it's a worldwide emblem for dementia to be used by an individual or business who want to raise awareness of dementia. Lovely project. And the Blue Peer Project was inspired by World Diabetes Day, which aimed to turn the world blue, or at least lots of famous landmarks. So the aim of the project is to light up all the peers in the UK and encourage health and care professionals to use the knowledge and expertise of people with diabetes. So if you want to find out more, follow @Blue Peer Project. And some final thoughts. The social web is all about connecting, engaging, debating, sharing thoughts and knowledge. So it's fascinating to see how many organisations who are still using social media channels to broadcast and to make a lot of noise about their products and services. There is still too much duplication of services and resources, which is both frustrating and costly. And I predict that social impact will become an increasingly important indicator for funders and investors. And for some Christmas fun, Digital December. Tips and ideas at Communities 2.0. Everything from saving money online, Xmas recipes, kids' activities, and sending a letter to Santa. Fascinating. Type in your address and look through the window at snow falling down your street. An American development, but lovely.
And I'm going to mention Santa's Journey, tracking Santa's journey with the North American Aerospace Defence Command at NORAD Santa. I do this every year with my daughter. It's quite amusing. I don't think she quite understands the implications of all that's behind that, but you can follow Santa as he's going around the world. Up to the minute information on Santa's Journey.
Absolutely. Highly recommended.
Well, that's that. That's it for us for this year. Wow, 16 shows we've managed to do, surely.
I know, amazing.
And if people want to hear us next year, what do they need to do?
They need to go to our crowdfunding mosaic on the Disruptive Social Care podcast. I've written about it, and we are launching imminently. And of course, our early supporters will get the best spots on the mosaic.
So look at that. There'll be a big link on the homepage, disruptivesocialcare.com, and links on our Facebook page, facebook.com/disruptivesocialcare. And until next time, I'm at Mindings Stew.
And I'm at Shirley Ayres.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Bye.